You seek rewards, Hunter?
Hey.
Hey all, Siege here, and guess what? It's theory time, and I've got a doozy for you. Yeah, that's right. Definitely something to think about moving forward in Warframe's story. Now, mind you, this is just a theory, but I think there's enough evidence here to warrant a discussion. And what I'm referring to is the fact that, well, I'm not completely convinced anymore that the void jump accident the Zariman 10-0 and its crew experienced was actually an accident. Rather, it may have been a staged situation in order to conduct an experiment. On top of that, well, I'm not even sure the Tenno existed before the unexplainable return of the Zariman. At least as children, mind you. Something that's starting to bring the Duviri paradox into focus a little bit more. So let's put some of the facts out there and see what you all think. First, I really hate having to say this still, but if you haven't played The Second Dream, War Within, Chains of Harrow, or The Sacrifice, well, there's quite a few spoilers in here, okay? But what you might want to ask yourself at this point is, what are you doing? Get on it already! Alright. Now, let's get back to this. The Zariman 10-0 was a military ship, not a freighter or the type of ship you might expect to be a transport for a large contingency of families, which is often what's assumed to be on that ship, right? Now, is it possible that the occupants of the Zariman 10-0 were sent into the void as guinea pigs instead of colonists, purposely, to see what it would do to humans already loyal to the Orokin? It gave the machines power enough to become sentient and pose an impossible threat to the Orokin. Is it really that far a stretch to think they wouldn't sacrifice a few soldiers in a military vessel for the possibility of having super soldiers infused with void energy capable of fighting off the sentient threat? I mean, that's what they got too, right? Consider that the Warframes are actually that same exact experiment, with the Orokin dealing with something they had no control of, substituting the infestation for the power of the void in that particular instance, mind you. They took soldiers, infused them with infested flesh, and hoped for the best, which, didn't really work out that well either, as the Warframes were overwhelmingly considered failures until the arrival of the Tenno. Because they became a force the Orokin couldn't control and count on to fight in their names. And the Sacrifice quest shows most likely why, that is, with the way they were treated, of course. I guess what I'm saying is, The Orkin have done it before. There's no reason to think they wouldn't experiment, rather recklessly I might add, with what they witnessed this power could do. Again, they've seen what it can do to regular machines. Really, what's the worst that could happen at this point? They've already created one enemy they can't deal with in sentience. Making one more has a, 50-50 chance of them being friendly to your cause, right? Unless we forget, the Orkin were, well, quite narcissistic in their power and quote-unquote genius. But their desire for perfection is littered with a whole host of terrible mistakes. Too often, I think, they were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't always stop to think if they should. So, they send a bunch of soldiers into the void and press their luck, even though we're meant to believe they sent families or colonists. There were no kids, at least according to Ember Prime's codex, where we find that when Colleen, the principal investigator of the Zariman 10-0 incident, noted that while conducting her personal inspection of the ship, there was literally no trace of the original crew. But what did she find? Children. So, are these children not part of the original crew? And let me make mention that she says children, not the children, just children, which I think is important context and lends itself to the thought that these kids were not part of the crew that originally left. Well, at least not looking like this, right? Still not convinced? Well, at the end of the passage, Colleen asks the military tribunal she's being examined by why they would ever consider putting children on a military vessel, to which the person replies, "We didn't. That would violate procedure." Yeah, it would be odd to put kids on a military ship, wouldn't it? Now, during the War Within quest, did anybody else find it interesting that the Grineer Queen knew so much about what was happening in the Zariman during the so-called accident? How does she know everything that went on? I mean, I guess you might say that this is like a mind meld between her and the Tenno, and by sharing a mind, she knows what they've experienced. But then, how does Teshin not only appear in there, but actively work to undermine what she's trying to do? And how does he know so much about transference, Margulis, and is so sure that what he's willing to undo would be a good thing? You know, they really don't put this front and center during the quest, but the Grineer Queen is actually an Orkin who has transferred bodies a few times now, and at the moment, this is the form she currently occupies. Now, during the quest, she makes mention of the fact that she knows about the Orbiter, she includes herself in the conception of the Warframes, and then there's this line.
We gave you your precious gifts, and now, just as easily, we take them all away.
They gave you your gifts? Is she referring to the Warframes or their void powers? The Warframes in themselves were an experimental accident. Were the void powers achieved in a similar experimental way? At the end of the day, I know these pieces don't fit together correctly. More and more I'm leaning towards the idea that this person we see in the Duviri Paradox is the original crew member of the Zariman 10-0, most likely a soldier that either willingly or unwittingly made the jump to the void in order to ascertain what effects it might have upon a loyal soldier or even civilian, even though, again, having military personnel aboard a military vessel makes the most sense. And they have to be stuck in some type of rift in time, which, of course, the void is considered to be. It's assumed this character has existed, well, at least as long as the Tenno, and yet they really don't look like they've aged much either, right? And the actual Zariman 10-0 returned years ago, except it's here, and with no traces of any of the crew. Well, except the children. It's an odd coincidence that the Orkin were already in the process of transferring themselves into younger bodies in order to live on in a form of immortality called continuity. Do you think it's possible everything that happened was exactly what the Orkin wanted? Think about it. If you were an Orkin noble in the business of immortality, one that requires a consistent stream of younger hosts, wouldn't the idea always be to improve the process and maybe make it so you don't ever have to do that again? Well, in that instance, what would be better than an immortal child? It seems to me that during the War Within quest, that's exactly what the Grineer Queen had in mind. Now, I'm definitely not saying the Tenno came out as planned here, mind you, but I just think that they ended up being the best possible outcome for the Orkin. They just needed time to understand the Tenno, that's all. After all, those that had come into contact in the days after the Zariman returned were, well, not doing so good. Kayleen had her face and skin pretty much melted off just for trying to comfort the children, and Margulis went blind trying to care for and understand them. But something happened that finally gave her the will to attempt continuity and stand in the presence of these kids. So something obviously changed in her perception of the Tenno. What gave her this confidence? I don't know, but I suppose we're going to find out. That being said, here are my final thoughts. One, obviously we are the same as, or will at least be connected to, the older Tenno. The question is, how's that going to be? Alright, here's my hottest take. Kind of in the same vein that the Tenno were housed in Lua as a way to protect them, I feel like this space in the void protects the Tenno's mortal self in a pocket in time. And now we're going to have to protect ourselves from the sentience. I mean, at this point, it's really the only way to ground the Tenno, isn't it? Power creep isn't just an issue in game. It's a problem lore-wise as well. Think about it. What exactly can defeat the Tenno? They exist as immortal gods with regenerating Wolverine-style suits of flesh, each with their own specially awesome godlike powers. It's like writing for Superman. What do? You invent kryptonite, of course. And well, my money's on this guy right here. Did I mention the lore is heating up? This is getting fun. At any rate, let me know if you enjoyed the video today and what you think about this potentially interesting turn in Warframe's story. Oh, please feel free to correct anything that I may have misinterpreted. Actually, let's be real, you're going to do that anyway, so how about just be gentle? Sound good? At any rate, I want you all to have a wonderful day today, and I'll talk at you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye. Hey all, Siege here, and I've finally completed my first and most likely last Kuvalich. Look, you like this kind of thing, that's great, and I'm glad for you, but this is without question the worst experience I've ever had in Warframe, and I can't think of anything that even comes close. The sheer amount of grind that's associated with the process is so incredibly tedious, long, and potentially difficult for such little reward that it's almost insulting. Seriously, I haven't been this mad while playing Warframe ever as far as I can remember, mainly due to the sheer bullshit throughout the length of the war against the Lich, both before you're capable to fight them, and even after you've accumulated all the boxes you need to check off just to actually fight the fucking guy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's chronicle my experience, and we'll talk about my overall impressions in more detail afterward, shall we? So I head to Adara, and after finally realizing what the fuck was causing the screen to go red in my last 10 missions without any syndicates or the stalker showing up, I killed my Kuvaling and we were off to the races. Immediately I remembered there were specific mods I needed by doing Kuva floods and siphons from the quote-unquote tutorial, which I guess covers all the bases, but doesn't prepare you one iota for what's really in your future. I only did floods, but was lucky enough that even DE realized how ridiculous the process is, so they gave out a bunch of Requiem relics the weekend the update launched. And no, DE, I don't forgive you. So, I gathered a nice group of Requiem relics, and I realized at that point these relics really did need to be upgraded in order to have a good chance at getting a nice collection before I went searching for the murmurs needed to know which Requiem mods were the right mods needed to kill my Lich. I know, it's kind of confusing at first. Not to mention this would require me grinding Void Fissure missions in order to generate some Void Traces, so into a sea of Void Fissures I went. Not sure if you can guess how this went, but let's just say that if you don't have Void Traces to upgrade regular relics, the chances of you getting anything any of the other players want enough to choose your reward to generate those sweet bonus traces is as small as the chances of getting mods and Requiem relics that aren't upgraded. Convenient, right? Anyway, after finally grinding out about 5 mods, I decided to begin the Murmur collection. Collecting murmurs requires heading into specific areas controlled by the Lich and killing designated targets called thralls, both filling this gauge up as well as making it increasingly more likely the Kuva Lich himself will spawn to come out and fight. Now this next part is what really made the overarching experience unpleasant as it continued on. That first fight against your Lich comes pretty quickly, and it's shockingly easy to burn through the Lich's shield and first health bar, but unless you were fortunate enough to own the correct mod right off the bat and slot it in the first mod slot, he one-shots you and gains a level. You die. And this cycle, this game loop, is the game loop. Grind Kuva floods for guaranteed Requiem relics, and if you're desperate or have literally nothing else to do with your time, or both, grind Kuva siphons for chances at relics. Then, grind the Kuva variant of Void Fissures, and when you run out of Requiem relics, you can either run a few basic planet nodes that have been increased in difficulty based on what level your Lich is powered up to, this being determined by how many times you've been bodied by the fucker by killing those thrall that show up. Occasionally, those thrall will drop a relic, so there's that, or hitting the regular Void Fissures while waiting for more Kuva floods or siphons to show up. It's really up to you how you want to attack this absurdity. I personally don't know, but here's what I do know. Nightwave already had me doing the same basic Warframe content. Exterminate, spy, defense, rescue, etc., over and over and over again for okay rewards. So I want to do something different now. Also, because the Lich and all the enemies on each controlled node get higher in level, some of these basic missions become a real fight for survival. And whereas I love a good challenge, I don't like dealing with bullshit, and that's exactly what happens as you get closer to actually being able to properly complete the Lich fight. Now, I caught on to what was happening overall after a few missions and was able to keep my Lich at level 4. But even then, these nodes are now at almost sortie levels, where I'm trying to fill this stupid little circle at a rate I can barely even see move when I get a thrall kill. That also seem to only spawn a few per mission, which means it takes a good many just to get each murmur for, what, basic mission rewards at the end? Basic mission rewards? And when you finally slog through old mission node after old mission node and finally acquire everything you need, get ready for the final fight. But to be honest, if your Lich is at 4 or 5 and you aren't min-maxed to at least some respectable degree and have a decent build on your frame, get ready for a bunch of final fights, as this motherfucker is going to do you as dirty as possible. And he's going to be bringing a shit ton of high-level help to swarm you in the process. Although I'll admit, once I was to this point, it still took an additional 7 missions at level 90 for him to finally show up, where I wasn't getting anything from my thrall kills. Now, if he kills you, he leaves. If any of the bullshit ads that seemingly spawn out of nowhere once he's randomly spawned out of nowhere to kill you, he leaves. And of course, if you get the relic wrong, or in the wrong order, he leaves, only to return a level higher on that last one. Now, In my particular case, there was a hidden bullshit modifier, essentially that my Lich was weak to radiation and electricity, two elements that don't do dick against high-level Grineer. So I then had to split my loadout to deal with ads versus the boss. And on top of all this, my Lich could seemingly one-shot me through walls, around corners. There was literally no safe place to stand or even hide, even when using Chroma or Rhino, given that he had Oberon's Hallowed Ground, Saren's Miasma, and an Arch Gun that could fire pretty damn fast. Something I was excessively excited about as my reward, given that I still don't even have the components for the Gravimag, because I wasn't real fond of that grind either. Lucky fucking me. Anyway, after all this nonsense, and trying multiple Warframes, weapons, companions, and even searching the internet to see if it was possible to just get rid of the Lich, I finally manned the hell up, got serious, and used Revenant. And even then, even when I had what I felt was a guaranteed win, I still lost once more to another random bombard. But finally,
I had to decide. It took me all of 10 seconds. Let's face it, boys and girls. A man has to have his priorities.
it's over. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun to have to regrind all those missions at such a high level for literally nothing special. It wasn't fun dealing with RNG on the acquiring Requiem relics, the RNG on opening the Requiem relics, the RNG on both the weapon type and the elemental amount, as that's, I guess, what everyone's really grinding, right? A percentage of elemental damage on a few base weapons for one decent weapon to come out of it. And then do that process over and over to try to get one of all of them? I mean, what else do you get from it? Riven slivers? Kuva? No. A lot would have to change for me to want to do this again. Off the top of my head, I can come up with a few things too. I would say more progress on murmurs for each thrall kill to start, and something more than an Exilus weapon slot reward as the highest tier on these relics, considering you can buy them from the syndicates right now. Maybe some special reward for collecting a full murmur, making, at least a few of those missions somewhat worth doing. How about a node to spawn once you've actually gotten all the required crap together, just so the last boss fight isn't so fucking RNG? Look, I like challenge, but this isn't challenge. It's just putting me at random and increasing disadvantages as it moves forward. Not to mention the fight itself is maybe the worst ever offender of the dreaded immunity phase, as an immunity phase in this fight goes through multiple missions. I look at it like this. Would I recommend any of my friends that have played Warframe in the past to come back for this update? Or try to entice a new player with this as one of the selling points of what endgame in Warframe might look like? Absolutely not. Mainly because I don't know who this game type serves other than veterans with literally nothing else to do in the game. New players fresh from completing War Within aren't going to want to do this. Even though the weapons, potential Rivens, and Kuvo would actually probably serve them best. Is, veterans have tons of weapons, tons of Kuva, and typically a whole host of incredibly rolled Rivens that outperform any of these new weapons already. So you tell me what I'm missing in the comments. And bear in mind that if you say there's an easier way to do this, or there's a better frame, or anything like that, none of that stuff is listed on the Wall of Wisdom. So how the hell was I supposed to know if I wanted to try the content without having to go out of the game to get it? I went in blind for the most part, with some basic advice from my Discord on how the random weapon system worked and what Warframes were strong for, and was actually really excited for this content. I liked how the Ropa Lowlist and Arlo boss fights seemed to show DE was making some real progress with boss mechanics, but this is a few steps back, I have to say, and until they change a lot more, not only do I see this game mode as one that will be largely forgotten in a year, It's definitely one I've had more than my fair share of. Let me know how your experience was. Fun? I'd love to hear. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Don't be too mad at me. And I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye. Hey all, Siege here. Today, I gotta run something by all you Warframe lore fans and see how you handle it. But first, let's give a little context, shall we? Now, spoilers ahead for anyone not at least up to the War Within and Chains of Harrow narrative, by the way. So, you know the drill. Concerning the Tenno, there is an incident they are involved in years ago where a kind of celebration turned massacre occurred, where the Tenno slaughter the Seven, beings who were held above all else within the Orokin society. Now, it's unclear if they were Orokin in the way we see Ballas, as he was in fact one of their executors, Orokin whose sole purpose was to execute the will of the emperors. It's been speculated that these emperors may have even been on par with the Tenno, also possessing what's known as an Oro, a kind of soul that exists simultaneously within and without the void. This is how Tenno are almost immaterial in nature, able to seamlessly transfer into the physical warframes and the golden maw, as well as never quote-unquote die. The Orokin society, under these emperors, typically used kuva, a type of mystical oil that allowed for the transference of one's mind and potentially soul to move from one vessel to another in a process called continuity, something the Grineer Queen specifically referenced during the War Within quest in wanting to preserve their own existence. As mentioned in the quest, the U-Van they refer to is actually created from Oro, which Teshin can be seen scraping from a Tenno's transference pod at one point. In fact, during Kuva's Siphon and Flood missions, the Queen implies that Kuva is a byproduct of the Tenno's transfer in and out of the void. Now keep this in mind because it's going to be relevant in a minute. So there's something that's always bugged me about this incident they are involved in years ago, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, is that we're told that the Tenno were responsible, and yet none of them remembers what really happened. Their memories of whatever transpired completely erased after the fact. Supposedly, the Orokin were celebrating the Tenno's dominance during the Old War, so much so that these incredibly wise beings that, remember, may have also had a soul just like the Tenno, originally ordered the death of the Archimedean Margulis due to her helping said Tenno, as well as being directly responsible for the Tenno's forced enlistment into the Orokin army, eventually becoming their only true resistance against the sentients. Bear in mind, these beings are said to never leave their own isolation pods for almost any reason. And yet, in this instance, they're okay with coming face to face with what amounts to be the gods they've been keeping in chains. Seems like the kind of thing really anyone with half a brain would at least prepare for in some way, don't you think? I guess what I'm trying to say is, given that we learned both Nata and the Tenno are manipulated into wrongly believing that she loved the children and took them away to protect them after assuming the role of the Lotus, something she reveals during the Red Bloodless fight. Is it that hard to question the idea that the Seven Emperors, not really seeing any real way to exist forever without constantly dealing with war, devised or were potentially offered a way into the void indefinitely and used this incident to hide their escape, to exist forever in the space between spaces? The Origin system's current situation, essentially bereft of natural life, is all because of Orokin experimentation. The Grineer? Yeah, that's the Orokin's fault. The Sentients? Yep, They sent artificially intelligent beings into the void as a slave race and stripped them of their ability to reproduce. Big surprise how that turned out. The infested? Yep, you guessed it. Orkin made. Now, one of the things the Orkin were in fact successful with utilizing was void energy in many different ways. In fact, their work with the void is unparalleled, and these beings would have priority over whatever information was learned during this process, as well as unfettered access into any mysteries they may have come across. Beings like this couldn't just disappear, as their society is pretty much based on their will. And what's interesting is, the Orkin Empire was never really the same after the Seven's absence. So, I think there's a real possibility they still exist, especially if they are Tenno-like in nature. I mean, ask Ortis how easy it is to kill an Orkin nobility. He'll explain just how difficult it can be. Truth be told, not only do I believe that they aren't dead, I think they may have even given the Orkin a kind of parting gift for their trouble. And it might be this. Comment from a longtime supporter of this channel led me down a rabbit hole to some rather thought-provoking possibilities, so I want to thank you first for the breadcrumbs that led me to noticing that the reliquary drive obviously has a port for the key we used to activate it, but if you look closely, there are 7 ports. It's a curious number, isn't it? Makes me wonder if there are, say, 6 more keys. If so, what happens if all 7 are inserted? Conversely, what happens if we put our current key into one of the other ports? Personally, I found the mission to get the reliquary drive itself bizarre. Sai speaks in riddles, there's a key sitting in the middle of what appears to be a tendril of the void that's much more reminiscent of what we see during the Chains of Hero quest, which to me seems pretty significant. I mean, it's obvious the man on the wall is going to play a huge role in whatever transpires given his already precarious involvement, but what if the Emperors, increasingly aware of the fact that the Orkin Empire is destined to fail, their home becoming a self-imposed wasteland, and every significant innovation they've come up with in the recent past to continue their existence either destroys the system or worse, turns on them and fights back. And we're just looking for a way out. Given their extensive research into the void, I think it's pretty safe to assume the man on the wall is something they've known exists for as long as they've utilized that void, and most likely have either come in contact with him through his desire, or maybe even their own. What if the Emperors were offered immortality, true immortality, by the man himself, to exist as an aura, rather than an Orakin, popping in and out periodically for them as well, saying, makes me think about the name Orkin. Kin of Aura. Family and relations of Aura. Maybe this goes back even further than anything we've seen influencing even the naming conventions of the society itself. After all, the Orkin were considered, by lesser races at least, humans included, to be sky people, if you will. Obviously, the man on the wall changed the Tenno from whatever they were into the Tenno they are now, so there's no reason to assume he couldn't do that same thing for other beings. Maybe this is how the 7 are said to have those same Tenno-like souls, and furthermore, would allow them to appear to have been massacred when in fact, only their physical form was affected. Is it impossible to believe inserting our key into another port would invoke a different finger? This is a finger of one of those 7. I mean, Yorkin specifically made this contraption, so they know how it works and where this thing came from, or else they wouldn't have built it the way it is. Maybe the power the Orkin utilize in order to navigate the void comes directly from this finger, charged with the void itself. A physical tether to one of the 7 is a vector to channel the energy. You know what? Maybe, just maybe, we might finally have a clue, a real clue, as to the identity of this character. They really look Tenno-like in appearance, don't they? And are very much associated with the void from what we already know. Perhaps this was a product of their involvement with the man. Maybe they went through the same process as the Tenno, only maybe willingly. Makes me wonder if this is why the Zerman was sent into the void. You know, something about that particular flight always seems suspicious to me. And more I'm beginning to believe that ship made the trip into the void specifically to induce exactly what occurred. Potentially confirmed right here during the Era quest.
Error speaks. Master Error. He speaks true. The Oricans are gone. The bios are divided. In fighting over what remains. Only the Tenno.
The Tenno. The enemy.
Yes.
Made by you. To kill us.
Yes.
The Tenno were made? I thought it was an accident. Regardless, it does seem like the man is getting exactly what he wants. And I want to believe this finger belongs to the man in the wall in some way. I really do. Potentially even representative of him being a manifested consciousness of the void. But I just have this feeling it's a red herring or something put into a story specifically to throw a person off the trail, so to speak. The man showing up on the drive itself, bending his finger, the voices coming from the pod. To me, it just feels too obvious for a character that's been so shrouded in mystery up to this point. I'm not saying it's not the case, just saying my spidey sense is tingling when I think about it, that's all. But what do you think? No matter what, things are coming into focus more and more. And I believe we might already be witnessing the pieces on the board starting to move forward in Warframe's narrative, which is, amazeballs. Because I love to speculate. But what did I miss? Let me know in the comments. And if you send me down an interesting path, either for this video or another one, I might get a shout out. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video today and hope it gives you something to think about during these weird times. Right? I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of the week. I'll talk at you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye. Today's video is being brought to you with help from G Fuel, one of the most popular energy supplements on the market, known for providing fuel for the focus of a new generation of gamers, creators, students, and athletes. Made with top-tier ingredients, their sugar-free formulas give you the energy, focus, and endurance you need to power through your daily tasks. And if you are interested in getting your hands on some, either to try it out for the first time and see if it's right for you, or to resupply your favorite flavor and are looking for a bit of a discount, please use the code DSIEGE and get 20% off your next purchase, while at the same time supporting this channel and helping me continue to create the content you've all come to enjoy. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested, and thank you in advance for any who choose to purchase using my code. I very much appreciate your support. Without further ado, on to the feature presentation.
It is with the greatest risk that I commit this recording. The codices within reveal the hidden weakness of your most feared enemy. My creations. My frames of war. What led us here? You did. You vile blasphemies. Machines thinking, breeding. You were to bear us a new, promised land. But when you arrived at that distant world, you knew that in time, we would bring ruin to it as well, as we had to Earth. And so it was, we came to war. I give you now the coordinates and codes to this place, but do not underestimate these devils on how they did what we could not. A miracle. But all miracles require sacrifice.
Hey all, Siege here, and today we continue on with our examination into the new war as a whole, with observations and some interesting possibilities presenting themselves with the information we now understand about the new war and Duviri in hindsight. This time we'll be looking at another major aspect within the new war's developing narrative, and that's the Jovian Concord as well as the Era cinematic. It might not have seemed like it at the time, but these updates brought with them some very important content story-wise, though not much in the way of an actual presented narrative, with one just being a somewhat confusing cutscene. However, without the events of the Jovian Concord, Ballast's overall plan would have never had a chance for victory, reinforcing much of what we experienced up till now, that he remains one step ahead, and perhaps a considerable bit more if looked at from a particular perspective. Now, the amalgamation of Ballast portrayed during the Chimera prologue would in fact be a precursor to what we would see during the Jovian Concord, where the sentients, now seeming more organized as well as possessing a specific agenda, visit Jupiter. Alad V, always looking for a way back into the graces of the Corpus Board, and especially prone to succumb to a shady deal should the payout be agreeable, is conveniently enough visited by a former acquaintance with a proposition, and in his haste and overall greed, Alad fails to understand what's actually happening until it's far too late, as told in the fragments found on Jupiter, giving us the truth behind this partnership.
Things have never been this bad. The currents are strengthening in that rank cesspool of a board. Nef Anyo has consolidated his power on Venus, winning Fraud Beck's favor. All eyes are turning towards their new darling. And the currents would drag me down. I am underestimated. I am unseen. I must turn that to my advantage. I seek advantage, and advantage appears. I'd long thought that old fool Reek is dead, but here he is, rich and gullible as ever, with an offer of shared wealth. Says he has tech like I've never seen. Old war tech. And he wants an investor. Oh, I'll invest all right. This is about more than investment. Rigas surprises me. How a man of his limited intellect can buy such wonders is... But forget that. What he has is exceptionally viable. Where did he find this technology? It stinks of Tau. But the advantages to be had in the exploitation of it, the things I could create, the profits I could accrue, the board will never dare underestimate me again. Regis's price was high, but I dangled the board's most enticing intellectual property, Syscon, to seal the deal. Then I placed a contract loaded with escape clauses and loopholes in that slack idiot's fingers. And he signed. The fool signed without even reading it. Any partner that thick is a liability. A liability soon to be nullified. Regis has changed. Or perhaps he is not such a fool. And today I saw beneath the mask. He is no longer so agreeable. Rather, he came to our meeting with a raft of his own radical proposals, an entire shift in direction. And then, as I made to leave, he smiled. He smiled, and just for a second, I don't think his face was human at all. This is all wrong. I'm tearing up the contract. I have a terrible feeling that if I do not escape this partnership immediately, I never will. That was not Regis. It never was Regis. It revealed its true face to me, and by the void, I've entered into a partnership with sentience. The world builders, the world killers, our enemy under all. This contract is worthless. Instead, they demand submission. CT, assemble the disciples, arm the condors. Those oversized crustaceans have no idea who they're dealing with. That did not go as planned. Thousands against one. That massive grotesque tore through my forces like a shark through a shoal. We never inflicted so much as a scratch. Now it perches outside my home. The message is clear. I am to make amalgams. And if I cross them, the Roparu list makes an ash cloud of this city. If my rivals find out, I'll be executed for treason. What choice do I have but to comply? Disciples, good news. The Amalgam program has entered into a fruitful partnership. Pursuant to our agreement, their identities will be kept confidential, and a strict no-fly zone shall be instated around their craft. In time, the nature of our project will be made known. Until then, know that we work for a brighter corpus future. Life is profit.
As of the making of this video, it's still unclear as to who this person actually was, aside from it not being the person Alad V originally knew, and forcing him into a partnership with the Sentients. But we never get any true confirmation of who he is definitively. Although it's possible, and maybe even probable, that this is just another mimic created by the Lotus, I've yet to encounter one in-game that camouflages itself as a human with the ability to negotiate with what would have to be a stolen voice, allowing the ruse to fool Alad so convincingly, and I believe it has to be at least questioned if there isn't another group of sentients we have yet to encounter with this skill, or that maybe we've already met them and just don't know it. Of course, we have met one entity that in fact can do this exact thing, and if we consider all this in hindsight, with Ballas being the face of the Narmer Crusade and the Man on the Wall's influence within the Prelude to War, this may in fact suggest that he and the Man on the Wall have some kind of connection or maybe even agreement in place? It's hard to say, but given Ballas' longevity, his involvement in Void technologies, his knowledge of the Tenno and their struggle with whatever the Man on the Wall is, forcing the use of transference to stop the initial voices the Tenno were struggling with, and the fact that they both seem to be leading the Tenno directly into the new war, more specifically to kill the Lotus, does beg to question if Ballas had his own interactions with the Indifferents, and, well, if anyone could convince an entity to join his cause, it would be Ballas. Curiously enough, emerging as the de facto ruler of Narmer, a group of sentients being led by an Orcan. If that doesn't prove him to be the obvious conductor of the orchestra of deceit the new war emphatically becomes, a world born on lies based on fear, well, I don't know what does. Regardless, the Sentients appear to have taken what they did to Ballas and utilized Alad's contingency as a breeding ground for a new type of sentient hybrid, the purposes of which are twofold. First, these new iterations of sentients are supposed to be able to shed their previous weaknesses, which most likely refers to the Flaw, a failsafe added to the sentients during their initial creation that would interfere with their ability to replicate, something that Lotus explained during the Nata quest.
All missions to the Origin system required a sacrifice. Me and my kind become barren when crossing the gap. It is the one flaw we never overcame.
But also, it interferes with their ability to adapt. Now, it's well known to us that the sentient enemies we face are problematic, mainly due to their resilience based on adapting to whatever they're being attacked with. And it's in this context where the Orcan originally felt they would be safe in their creation and utilization, something we will dig a bit deeper into later in the video. These newest sentient creations also had a second, potentially more important function though, and that was to test the capabilities of the Tenno and figure out some method by which they could be nullified. As we'll come to find out in the very near future, they are in fact successful. However, once the Tenno realize what the stakes of this game are, they attempt to confront the creature holding this Corpus Sect hostage, the Ropalolist, believing that if Alad was freed of its presence, he might reconsider the continued existence of this project. And along the way, they're actually contacted by the Lotus herself.
Our history is smoke, blurred by dreams, guided by ghosts. A voice, a void, lurks inside you. its purpose not yet shown. But what am I? My father was a farmer. My mother, a carpenter. Given light by the Golden Lords to build for them a better world. But my family's journey was long. Time began to change their light. Creativity, pride, a will to live. So the Golden Wrath came, and after, I was born. A mimic, a spy. Conceived to burrow into nests and swallow the pitch eggs of their war machine, the Tenno. But when I saw the tender faces, I took mercy. Or so we were told. But in truth, we were both imprisoned in Lua's belly. My light remade by the creators. I became a memory, a ghost. Reprogrammed to destroy my family, my people, my history. But now I am saved by family. Together, we will overcome the flaws of our light, gods of our creation, merging with them like steel, bearing amalgams with the weakness of neither.
Now, I think it's important to acknowledge that her new form doesn't appear to be what she used to look like as a pure sentient, as she still retains most of her human look, aside from her face and visor. And further, the diagram from one of the amalgams used within these fragments looks very similar to how the Lotus now appears, being reinforced during the New War itself when Ballas sends her presumably into the Void, but with this suit of sorts going first, most likely suggesting that the form we are shown here was one that was given to reinforce her newly rediscovered history and beliefs, ones she shares with us during the fight with the Ropalolist.
Your great power, your great evil, the voice, the void within you. Our ancients still wither at its touch. But have you forgotten, Lua? You were saved. But I was changed. Now I learn. Now I deny. We suffer these testaments of Tenno evil, their voice and void. Suffer it well, ancient child. Do not relent. Go below us. Rise. Remain. And die for the others to live. I have seen the wall's other face too. I have heard the voice. Rise, ancient Ropalolist, my other flesh. Your sacrifice will breathe a new way for a new kind. So it is. So you have done. Time and again. Eradicating my people, my history. So it will be with yours, child. I am the witness, the victim, the judge. My family has returned. Your trial, soon to begin.
Nonetheless, we defeat this new flying Eidolon sentient, and are then forced to wait and see what the implications of both it and many of the Amalgam's deaths are leading to. One other thing to keep in mind is that with the manipulations at play, it can't be discounted that either some or all of what the Lotus tells us is untrue, or at least not the whole truth, especially considering what we witness in the very near future.
Let her go.
If I had a heart, it would be broken. If my eyes could weep, I'd be blind. Look at what they've made of you. You're a god. You're a queen. But somehow the bees have you as a hostage. Do you even recognize me anymore?
I recognize the enemy.
No. Sister, it's me. Era. The Makers caught you, unraveled your mind. They're using you to kill us. The Queen of the Aphids, with her eye in the void. But I don't blame you. I blame them. You believe these are your children, but I am the only family you've got left. So choose our family, our people, or these parasites. Choose, Nata. Choose!
I am not Nata. I am the Lotus.
The imagery we are immediately shown in the Era cinematic comes from the Old War. The fight the Sentients felt they had to bring to the Orokin to protect both the sanctity of Tau, their new home, as well as get a measure of revenge for the aforementioned flaw, forcing them to stay in Tau or risk its effects, making that area as much of a prison as it was a home to them. Those with a keen eye will notice the appearance of the White Whale, if you will, Excalibur Prime, only available to founders of Warframe, as well as Hunhao appearing in the sky above. Interestingly enough, the Samaris crewman imprint shows us who is most likely responsible for the sentience being utilized in the first place, as well as an explanation regarding the aforementioned flaw, and why it was incorporated into their creation. They opened the chamber door just in time for me to see it happen. The Archimedean erupting into a flash, jade-like and blinding. I knew her. She was the greatest scholar of genetics who had ever lived, except now she was nothing but mist and gore. A voice boomed from within. "The crewman project is cancelled. Send in the next." The rifles at my back tried to urge me inside. Old faces filled the dome's projections, immense and godlike. I walked into the center of the room, and the scorched scent choked my lungs. All around me they watched, bored as I knelt upon the darkened judgment disc. The projection of Executor Ballas swelled large in front of me. I could see his purity, his symmetry, the beauty of his glittering gold irises. His voice thundered. "The principles are clear. Your sentence is death. May the void forgive you." As the judgment disc began to light, I stood, took a deep breath and spoke. "She will not forgive you." Laughter broke out among the faces of the dome. Others asked, "What did he say?" Ballas only smiled. "You challenge us, Archimedean." "I do. Kill me, and the empire you're sworn to uphold dies with me." Ballas turned his head as the judgment disc went suddenly dark. "An appeal comes at a price. Should you fail, you and your corpus will pay dearly. They already suffer in this growing wasteland. They've already paid. Will you also sacrifice the royal futures by ignoring my solution? Your solution is an abomination. Like you, it will be annihilated." Ballas motioned to the guard. "Present the evidence." The chamber doors opened and a mass of guards entered, guns trained inward. As they reached the center, they parted, revealing a small cart. Atop the cart was a motionless creature, no larger than a hand. Its body was symmetrical, star-shaped with a seamless matte black shell. A new projection. That of Executor Tuvil ballooned into the space.
It looks harmless.
Harmless. Ballas boomed in Tuvil's direction. He turned to the center of the dome. Show them. On command, the guards backed away from the cart and readied their weapons. Their leader took careful aim and fired a whisper round into the body of my creation. 2 of the limbs tore off the frame, revealing a glossy, gelatinous interior. Silence gripped the dome as Tuvil shook his head. Then suddenly, the creature moved, convulsed. The hard surface started undulating. In a moment, the wound closed, and the thing was whole again. Beside it, another machine had grown from its severed parts. Their surfaces had changed, however. Brighter, harder, resilient to the whisper rounds now. Ballas looked triumphant as voting lights began to appear on the judgment disc. My green death was coming, so I roared at them. Did our ancestors, burned by fire, reject its power? No. They conquered their fear and learned to control it. The 7 principles are a joke. His projection swooped down to me. The Orokin is the law, and the law is the Orokin. We are unbending. Your appeal is denied. Tuvil interrupted.
Our laws are sacred, but do not forget the plan, Ballas.
His visage turned down to me.
Countless other ventures have failed the plan. How will this machine fulfill its design?
I tried to catch my breath and speak. The crossing to the Tau system is perilous. Adaptation and replication are the only way a terraforming journey can be made. They will build an interstellar rail as they travel. They will adapt to the host planet and prepare it for our arrival. They will save you. Tuvil peered down at me.
And when it completes its task, what will prevent it from turning on us? As the 7 principles say.
The flaw. Tuvil's eyes narrowed.
The flaw?
The void is poison to them. Once they've reached Tau, they will be marooned there. To travel the rail here would destroy them. Whatever the risks, the origin system will be... Ballas shouted, Enough! Dereliction of the law threatens the entire empire. Which one of you will risk this? Ballas was growing increasingly frustrated. The empire is already at risk, cried the shrill voice of another executor. Or perhaps you haven't noticed from your cozy position on Mars. To this there was a round of applause and the judgment disc remained unchanged.
Ballas, you lack consensus,
shouted Executor Tuvil. His projection seemed to shrink smaller until he finally broke his silence. Archimedean Parental. Against my better judgment. His disgust was palpable. Your appeal has been accepted. You are free to go. One by one, the projections of each executor in the tribunal flickered off, and the guards ushered me into the hall. There I stood, wrapped with shock when I heard his footsteps behind me. You did better than I thought you would. It was Ballas, the man, not the projection. It would seem nobody truly knows they want a thing until you threaten to take it away. He broke into a smile. Wouldn't you agree, Archimedean? Who else but Ballas, revealing himself as a puppet master ages ago, utilizing perhaps his most devious and dangerous ability, calculated misdirection, playing everyone in the room to utilize the Archimedean's creation and persuade the entirety of the ruling body into compromising their own ideals and even break their own laws, weaponizing both their jealousy and contempt for him as well as his own perceived arrogance to get what he wants. In my opinion, this passage encapsulates Ballas brilliantly. A man always playing both sides in order to maintain a level of control in every situation he finds himself in. Dangerously meticulous, brilliant, stoic and patient, reaffirming his formidable and uncompromisingly terrible nature. This passage is also eerily similar to how the Tenno were first utilized as weapons of war.
What they need, Margulis, is to be destroyed. They're devils from that hell, not human anymore.
No, Palace, no more destruction. We could heal them. Maybe they're meant to save us.
How can you defend these devils, Margulis, after what they've done to you?
Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. They won't hurt anyone. I just need more time.
With Ballas attempting to act as though he hates the Tenno, denouncing them continuously as devils and almost deemed too dangerous by him. Curiously enough, in nearly the exact same way utilized in the crewman imprint passage.
It is with the greatest risk that I commit this recording. The codices within reveal the hidden weakness of your most feared enemy. My creations, my frames of war. We cultured the infestation, conceiving of a hybrid, transformed, but only just. The Helminth was created, born to yield these new warriors, worthy of battle against you, the great and terrible Hunhow. We took our greatest, volunteers or not, and polluted them with these cultured reagents. They transformed. They became infested, but only just. Their skin blossomed into sword steel, their organs interlinked with untold resilience. Yet their minds were free of the infested madness. Or so we thought. We set them upon the battlefield, biodrones under our command. The Warframes, all of them failures. Surprised? They turned on us, just as you did.
Yes, hurry, Tenno, but be careful. Last time you got close with the sentients, you wiped out an entire civilization. But you don't remember that, do you?
And so we had no choice but to commit them to grave.
Only to be adopted in a very similar, or one might say the same way the sentients were, as tools of the Orokin. But immediately after the battle scene on Lua,
let her go.
If I had a heart, it would be broken. If my eyes could weep, I'd be blind. Look at what they've made of you. You're a god. You're a queen. But somehow the bees have you as a hostage. Do you even recognize me anymore?
I recognize the enemy.
No. Sister, it's me. Era. The Makers caught you, unraveled your mind. They're using you to kill us. The Queen of the Aphids, with her eye in the void. But I don't blame you. I blame them. You believe these are your children, but I am the only family you've got left. So choose our family, our people, or these parasites. Choose, Natah. Choose!
I am not Natah. I am the Lotus.
Reformation is accelerating. Our conduits are nearly ready. Our rebirth is at hand.
And the Golden Spear? How many battalions?
Still having lapses. Listen to me. That's the past. The old war. Tell her, Maker.
Yes, there is no spear, no Nata. Error speaks. Master Error. He speaks true. The Oracle are gone. The bios are divided. Infighting over what remains. Only the Tenno.
The Tenno. The enemy.
Yes.
Made by you. To kill us.
Yes.
But you have something our people have never had before in the Tar. You're stained by their wickedness. Use it. Use their sin against them.
They're listening.
Let them.
They know we are building.
It won't matter.
No, it won't.
So what are you waiting for? Sing for us, sister. Call them home!
We are brought into what appears to be a literal garden of lotus flowers, growing out from deep within the moon, and might indicate that these pods grow directly into the floor above, with the stem appearing very similar to a void portal, much like the one leading directly to the lotus's original chamber during the Apostasy prologue, as we fall down one of these stems before reaching her. The void's inclusion as the stem could also explain how all Tenno can access her, regardless where their pods are on Lua. Although that is unfortunately just speculation, based on its appearance at least at the moment. Further, when considering the placement of these pods, and specifically that they reside in the former Orcan capital, the Moon, the Margulis implant cutscene experience between missions, as well as Ballas exhibiting some form of control on the Lotus during the New War, I feel show the machinations of Ballas' betrayal against the Orcan in full view here years, perhaps even centuries before the events of the Tenno within the game itself, especially when considering Varzia's presence within the scene. When visiting her at Maru's Bazaar, she confirms that someone had given the keys to the reservoir away.
Kid, I trade all this prime gear for a few shards of Seriglass, a hammer, and 5 minutes alone with whatever gilded bastard gave the sentients the key to the reservoir. Era hurt me. But if you kids hadn't showed up, he'd have killed me. And in my book, that means I owe ya. So, here I am.
She also has another bit of dialogue that, within the Warframe universe, kind of bugs me.
The kicker isn't that you kids brought down an empire. It's that half of you don't remember doing it.
Why will no one tell the Tenno what actually happened? Sure, it's insinuated a bunch of times, with what I believe is even the Lotus trying to help us remove blame at one point.
What you did, you didn't have a choice. Tenno, you were only just a...
Don't do that. Don't make excuses for me.
But in looking at this scene in particular, I can't help but think the lack of any memory of the incident, paired with what we see, might insinuate that when the Tenno destroyed the Orkin governing body, well, let's just say they weren't necessarily the ones in control of the situation, a theme that reappears frequently within the Warframe narrative. Further, Varzius says,
It's that half of you don't remember doing it.
where are these Tenno that know what happened? Sure, she could just be using an expression, but it insinuates that some Tenno do remember this incident, and it begs to ask, will we ever meet them?
Within the moon lies the reservoir, the secret to your Tenno power. But the secret is dangerous. It drove the Slayer to madness.
And if so, why do some remember while others don't? Overall, there's a lot of suspicious activity in this cutscene to begin with, and we're never really given an explanation on how any of it is possible. First seeing what appears to be the past, with 7 individuals, 5 black-eyed Tenno, the Lotus, and the Man on the Wall, or us, or both of us. If this is all a vision like those of the Narmer Vale, emanating specifically within this incident from the Lotus helmet, it's entirely possible that some of the participants here are being represented by someone else, especially if the idea of all of this is to confuse and influence, which I think is only reinforced at the end of the scene, having us magically transported to what looks like the present, with the Man on the Wall relinquishing control of our body, now conveniently perched within the sentient stronghold to hear a very specific message. We also find Ballas leashed by Era, with the Lotus discussing the war to come. And his subjugation here, given the solidarity the Lotus, the sentients, and he have during the sacrifice quest, should have been the first indication that something we're seeing doesn't quite make sense. And as before, it begs the question if everything we're witnessing isn't just a carefully crafted manipulation by Ballas, forcing her to speak to us as an adversary potentially even on the way to the Ropalolist, and now strangely being brought to this specific moment to make Ballas appear even more like the victim than he attempted to portray himself to be during the Chimera prologue, solidifying the idea within the narrative that the Lotus was not to be trusted. And I think it was at this point a great many Tenno wrote the Lotus off, branded her an enemy and betrayer, and needed to be put down. Ballas's plans of deception paying off in full. Now the biggest question that has to be fully answered yet is, why does it appear that the Man on the Wall is helping Ballas? Was this a necessary step in order to end the war permanently? A way to test how pliable the Tenno were to alternate ideas on how to deal with the Lotus? And does this insinuate that he wants her dead? With the end of the new war a brief nod to the larger, potentially cosmic battle still to come? Or perhaps worse, was the end of the new war part of the plan? Does Ballas yet live? His body curiously missing at the end of the new war, reappearing sometime after in Duviri? Some say this is just Kalervo's manifestation playing out, but don't be surprised if Ballas doesn't make a return at some point in the future, potentially sooner than later. He's been consistently outthinking pretty much everyone he's encountered up to this point, and if the Lotus can be rescued from the void miraculously, his appearance after the new war most assuredly portends some greater power the Tenno will have to deal with at some point. And with that, dear friends, we will conclude part 2. However, stay tuned for part 3, where we will take a deeper look into Era specifically, as well as the secret message we are soon to be sent. So I hope you all join me for that in the near future. But, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed part 2 of this deep dive into the new war as a whole, and it got you thinking about just what else we've been lied to about, and by whom. What characters do you still trust in Warframe? At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye. Today's video is being brought to you with help from G Fuel, one of the most popular energy supplements on the market, known for providing fuel for the focus of a new generation of gamers, creators, students, and athletes. Made with top-tier ingredients, their sugar-free formulas give you the energy, focus, and endurance you need to power through your daily tasks. And if you are interested in getting your hands on some, either to try it out for the